She paid $750 to own a whole abandoned town. Every person in the area made fun of her terrible decision. That was until she broke into the ancient bank safe that nobody had opened since 1947. Inside, she discovered something that would make everyone stop laughing immediately. Before we begin, let us know what part of the world you're watching from. If stories like this interest you, remember to click that subscribe button. The next episode coming tomorrow will truly blow your mind. Let's begin. The person running the auction banged his hammer down. The sound was empty and bounced around the dirty courtroom. $750. That's the total amount Rachel Winters paid to own all of Copper Creek, Nevada. Nobody lived there anymore. It had 37 rundown buildings and old hopes that were long gone. A small group of people from nearby who bothered coming to the tax sale looked at one another and quietly snickered. Rachel, who was 34 years old, raised twin children who were 8 by herself. She just used up what little money she'd saved on 20 acres filled with weeds and old rotten buildings. Hope you understand what you just did, the county office worker mumbled while pushing the ownership papers toward her. The way he talked showed he believed she had no idea. Rachel's worn-out hands shook just a bit when she picked up the document. These were hands that had worked for 10 years repairing car parts and doing oil changes at Millbrook's only auto shop. But when she spoke, her voice didn't shake. I understand perfectly what I just did. The truth was, she didn't, not completely. But 3 weeks earlier, someone had given her a notice to leave her rental home. The person who owned it wanted to sell to companies that build houses. Trying to locate a different home she could pay for with what a mechanic earns while taking care of Emma and Noah by herself? There was no way. That's when she spotted the advertisement. Whole empty town. Government sale. Starting price $750. It seemed insane. It was a move born from having no options. It was the perfect answer to what she needed. Her twin kids sat waiting inside her old, damaged Ford truck when she exited the courthouse. Emma pushed her nose up to the glass window. Her breathing made fog on it. Mom, did we buy it? Did we get to own our very own town? Rachel got inside and tried starting the motor 3 times before it worked. She grinned even though her stomach felt tight with worry. Yes, sweetheart, we own our town now. Getting to Copper Creek meant driving for 2 hours on streets that changed from smooth to rocky to almost invisible. The October sun had already started dropping behind the hills when they reached the top of the last slope. Below them stretched out their new place to live. Even with the beautiful golden evening light, the place looked like time had forgotten it. The central road ran about 300 yards from end to end. Old structures lined both sides, tilting toward each other like elderly people whispering together. Every surface with color left showed peeling layers. Glass openings stared with no life. Some had boards nailed over them. Others were shattered. Every single one was vacant. This place is amazing, Noah said quietly from the seat behind them. Only a child who's 8 could spot wonder where grown-ups saw foolishness. But Rachel appreciated that about him. She appreciated both her kids for spotting chances where other people only noticed trouble. They would definitely need that hopeful attitude for what was coming. She stopped the truck where the Copper Creek General Store used to do business. The wooden advertisement board dangled from a single metal link, moving back and forth in the desert wind. They stepped out carefully, like moving too quickly could make the entire place crumble down. Emma grabbed Rachel's hand tightly. Mom, do dead people's spirits live here? Only the type that hold on to old memories, Rachel answered, although she wasn't totally certain. People had left the town empty starting in 1973 after the copper mining operation shut down. Earlier than that, nearly 2,000 people had lived and worked there as a successful group. At this moment, every bit of it belonged to them. Each of the 37 structures, starting with the aged hotel going to the school building, ending with the bank that crouched in the intersection like a stone frog. Their first evening was spent sleeping inside the vehicle. Rachel had packed equipment for camping outside, but nobody felt brave enough to enter any buildings once darkness came. The nighttime stars visible from this location were unlike those in Millbrook. They shone more intensely, seemed nearer, and went on without end. She wrapped her arms around both children and created stories about the exciting times ahead, the shelter they would make, the existence they would start from nothing. She kept quiet about the thoughts in her brain that kept saying she'd chosen terribly. When morning arrived, the air was freezing and the sky was clear. Rachel opened her eyes with a sore neck and ice crystals covering the front glass. Her twin kids had woken up already, both faces pressed up to the windows, staring at the sunrise coloring the abandoned town in gold shades. With daytime here, the place seemed less frightening and more filled with possibility. Things were still falling apart, but falling apart in ways that suggested repairs could work. And fixing things that don't work right? That was Rachel's greatest talent. Their work started at the general store building. The entrance had a lock on it, but the timber surrounding the metal part had rotted so badly that one strong push made it swing wide. Tiny particles floated in the sunlight beams coming through openings in the ceiling. Nothing sat on the storage racks. The service counter had bent and warped. Decades worth of grime covered the floor. But the basic structure looked solid. Real wood boards, the type nobody makes in modern times. "Mom, come see," Emma shouted from the area behind the counter. She'd located an aged record book with pages turned yellow and fragile. The final written entry showed the date June 15th, 1973. 5 pounds of flour, 2 metal containers of beans, 50 feet of cable for mining. Payment received completely. "Normal town business," interrupted halfway through. They investigated every structure one after another. The hotel building with 12 sleeping rooms and a fancy stairway missing half the wooden steps. The school building still showing math problems written on the front board. The mail office with small boxes that would never hold letters again. Finally, when afternoon sunshine came at a low angle, they walked up to the bank building. Copper Creek Savings and Loan got constructed to survive anything. While other structures used wood and wishful hopes, this bank used stone and metal. Metal bars covered its glass openings. The entrance was solid metal, and different from all other town structures, it appeared exactly how it must have when people abandoned it. Even the brass sign with its name only looked dull, not ruined. Rachel tested the entrance, locked naturally. But dangling from her new collection of metal keys, the office worker had provided a large ring, holding keys for all town structures, hung one heavy, brass key that appeared important. She inserted it into the keyhole. It rotated with a rough grinding noise, and the entrance swung inward. The metal parts holding it squeaked like upset birds. Inside looked like something preserved from the past. Particles of dust blanketed every surface thickly, but underneath, the bank appeared ready to conduct business. The window areas where tellers worked still had brass metal bars. The manager's work table still contained an ink container and paper blotter. And there, covering the complete rear surface, stood the safe. It looked incredible, the way aged objects made for protecting precious things look incredible. The entrance measured no less than 6 feet tall and 4 feet across, all made from metal and brass with a turning dial big as a supper plate. The company name that built it got stamped on top, Harrisburg Safe Company. Started in 1891. "Can we get inside?" Noah questioned, speaking softly like inside a holy building. Rachel examined the safe carefully. No place existed for a key. Only that turning dial and one enormous handle. She possessed keys opening all Copper Creek structures, but nobody had given her number combinations. The person who sealed this safe in 1973 carried that information away forever. "Not right now," she responded, although something inside her chest grew tight with wondering. "We have an entire town waiting for us to look at first." But when nighttime came, after her twin children lay sleeping inside cloth bags on the general store's freshly cleaned floor, Rachel stayed awake, considering that safe. What would a disappearing town choose to lock up tight? Cash money would have gotten withdrawn and moved to financial institutions in larger cities. Paperwork that mattered would have been collected. So what required guarding even while everyone ran away? She'd purchased an abandoned town for $750 because she had no other choice. But at this moment, looking at the sky full of stars through a ceiling opening, she questioned whether she'd purchased something bigger than expected. Morning arrived, bringing unexpected guests. Rachel stood on top of the general store roof, attempting to cover the biggest holes with waterproof material when engine sounds reached her ears. 3 trucks came rolling down the main road, creating dust clouds that hadn't moved in years. She climbed down fast, still gripping her hammer. The first truck's entrance opened, and a man stepped out who appeared carved from identical stone as the nearby hills, aged by weather sturdy, showing no smile. 5 additional men climbed from the other vehicles behind him, each wearing the same tough expression of folks who dislike outsiders. "Are you the person who purchased Copper Creek?" the man in charge questioned. He didn't say his name. Rachel stood up straighter, feeling glad she held a hammer. "That's me, Rachel Winters." He looked her over, noticing the pants stained with grease, the worn hands, the ready-to-defend posture. "Tom Morrison. My relatives have controlled the property beside this location for 4 family generations." He stopped talking. "Most people believe you're out of your mind. Most people probably think correctly," Rachel responded. "But it's my type of crazy. I purchased it fairly and completely." That nearly created a smile on his face. Nearly. "What does one woman living alone intend doing with an entire abandoned town?" "Turn it into our home," she stated plainly. "Repair whatever can get fixed. Live peacefully. Give my children somewhere they can properly breathe." Tom exchanged quick looks with the men beside him. "Do you know the reason this location died?" "The mining operation closed down." "No mining operation, no income. No income, no town." That explains some of it. Tom moved nearer, but mining stopped because of something that occurred at the bank building. Perhaps you ought to question why nobody has touched that locked safe in almost 50 years. Why every person left town practically in one night. Why nobody before you acted foolish enough purchasing this location, even for only $750. Rachel suddenly felt cold even with warm morning sun. What occurred at the bank building? Tom studied her face for another extended moment. Then he walked back toward his truck. Certain questions work better staying unasked, Miss Winters. Certain entrances work better staying locked. He paused beside his truck entrance. But supposing you're determined about staying, you'll want to nail boards over that safe room. Board it closed and make yourself forget it exists. That represents my suggestion. They drove off, leaving Rachel standing inside a dust cloud with additional questions instead of answers. Emma and Noah had observed from the store entrance, both with large eyes. Who were those men, Mom? Emma questioned. People living nearby. Rachel answered, though that word seemed incorrect. Back in Millbrook, folks living nearby delivered warm food and volunteered to watch children. These folks living nearby delivered cautions. She worked the remaining day with unusual energy, covering roof holes, cleaning floors, making a single structure barely suitable for living. But her brain kept spinning. What could be inside a safe that would frighten an entire town away? What could be terrible enough that 50 years afterward, people still cautioned strangers to leave? When evening arrived, she located her answer, or at minimum where answers started. She sorted through containers in what used to be the newspaper building when she discovered them, bound books of the Copper Creek Gazette. Years of town history squeezed into yellowing printed papers. She began with 1973, moving backward through time, searching for hints. The announcement about mine closing appeared in March. By June, every person had departed, but the February editions made her blood turn icy. February 7th. Bank boss William Hartley passes away at his house. Natural reasons caused it, the newspaper claimed, although he'd only lived 43 years. February 14th. Assistant boss James Chen discovered dead. His heart stopped. He'd lived 38 years. February 21st. Main teller Margaret Morrison dies. A stroke killed her. She'd lived 35 years. 3 workers at the bank. 3 weeks passing. 3 people dying. All reported as natural reasons. But Rachel had worked enough time underneath car hoods with supposedly easy problems to recognize when numbers don't make sense. The final printed edition, showing the date June 30th, contained just one article, Copper Creek, How a Town Ended. It discussed the mining operation, money problems, families leaving for improved chances. But in the closing paragraph, almost like something added at the last second, it said the bank safe would stay sealed, waiting for a federal government investigation. Federal government investigation. Rachel leaned back inside the dusty newspaper building, her light creating long, dark shapes. Her children slept without worry in the room next door. She'd purchased an empty town, yes. But now she grasped she'd purchased its hidden information too. What occurs next will show the reason an entire town ran away feeling scared, what truly sits behind that massive metal entrance, and the reason certain mysteries deserve $750 and all the bravery one single mother can collect. If this story interests you, please press like, press share, and subscribe for additional stories. The federal government investigation. Those 3 words repeated inside Rachel's thoughts. For multiple days, she pushed herself into making the general store suitable for living, covering wall openings, removing years of particles, creating a temporary cooking area using their camping equipment. But her thoughts continued drifting toward that safe, toward those 3 people dying, toward questions nobody wanted answering. Emma and Noah adjusted to empty town existence with the toughness only young people possess. They changed exploring into exciting adventures, converting the vacant structures into royal kingdoms and military forts. They located treasures in all directions, aged bottles colored purple from years under sunshine, nails with square tops, a china doll head that Emma argued absolutely wasn't frightening. But they understood they should avoid the bank building. Mom had explained that clearly. 2 weeks into starting their new existence, Rachel drove for 1 hour reaching the county records building. If federal government people had investigated, paperwork had to exist. The office worker, a young lady who observed Rachel with identical mixing of feeling sorry and amazement, saved for folks who juggle dangerous saws, retrieved folder after folder. Nobody has requested information about Copper Creek in years, she stated. Dust puffed upward with each folder. Most of these haven't gotten touched since someone filed them away. Rachel used the complete day reading. Property ownership changes. All showing dates of June 1973, all selling for tiny amounts of money. Mining operation reports displaying the copper mineral vein remained far from empty when work stopped. And then, inside a folder labeled Federal Government Letters, She located it, a written message from the FBI sent to the county sheriff, showing the date February 25th, 1973. Responding to your question regarding the deaths at Copper Creek Savings and Loan, we're starting a formal investigation into possible stealing of federal government gold storage. Please secure the bank structure and confirm nobody enters the safe without permission. Federal government agents will reach there within 30 days. Federal government gold storage. Rachel read it 3 separate times, confirming she understood. The bank had been storing federal government gold. Gold that now sat locked inside a safe that hadn't opened in 50 years. She discovered additional information. Copper Creek Savings and Loan had gotten selected as an emergency hiding place during the Second World War. Multiple small banks across Nevada had gotten used for storing gold storage, dividing the danger in case enemies attacked major cities. After the war ended, most gold was supposed returning to Fort Knox or other major hiding places. But government paperwork moved at slow speeds, and certain smaller amounts got forgotten. Until 3 bank workers died across 3 weeks. Rachel's hands trembled while reading the investigation report. The FBI had suspected the bank workers found the forgotten gold and schemed to steal it. The theory stated they'd betrayed each other, possibly using poison on one another, although no proof got discovered. The investigation halted when agents reached there, finding the complete town abandoned and the safe sealed with number combinations only the dead workers knew. Time-based locks, she said quietly, reading the technical descriptions. The safe had gotten fitted with a time-based locking device as a security addition. Once someone turned it on, opening became impossible until the timer finished. Standard time length, 50 years. She checked the date displayed on her telephone. October 21st, 2023. Her heart beat rapidly while she calculated. The safe had gotten sealed during late February 1973. If the time-based lock got programmed for 50 years, it should have opened 8 months earlier. Rachel drove back toward Copper Creek, driving faster than felt safe on those curving roads. Sunset was happening when she stopped at the bank building, coloring the stone structure in orange and shadow shades. She remained sitting inside the truck for an extended moment, motor making ticking sounds while cooling, attempting to process what she'd discovered. Federal government gold, forgotten across decades. 3 suspicious deaths. A time-based lock that should have stopped working. And her, gripping keys to all structures in a town that got abandoned, rather than confronting whatever sat inside that safe. She considered Emma and Noah sleeping inside the general store, trusting her keeping them protected. Considered the eviction paper that had pushed her to offer $750 she couldn't afford losing. Considered Tom Morrison's caution to nail boards over the safe and make herself forget it existed. But she also considered winter approaching, considered the repair structures required, considered the existence she'd promised her children they'd construct here. If gold truly sat inside that safe, federal government gold that got forgotten inside some Washington office filing drawer, wouldn't it belong to whoever controlled the ownership papers for the property? She'd purchased the complete town after all. Each structure, each debt, each possession. She stepped from the truck and walked toward the bank entrance. Her key rotated easily at this point, the locking device freed by her repeated usage. Inside, final sunshine beams came through barred glass openings, changing dust into tiny galaxy systems. The safe entrance stood at the rear section, patient like a hill. Rachel approached slowly. She'd assumed it stayed locked by number combination, but at this moment she examined more thoroughly. A small metal sign existed that she'd overlooked earlier. Dull, but still readable. Time-based lock security device. Turned on. February 28th, 1973. Length of time, 50 years. Underneath that, a smaller written line. Emergency bypass key needed. Her heart halted. She looked downward at the large collection of keys the county office worker had provided. Dozens existed, each tagged with disappearing labels. Mail office, hotel building, prison cell. And there, almost hidden among the rest, one small brass key with an uncommon 8-cornered top. The tag stated just federal government. Using shaking fingers, she separated the key. It felt different from the rest, heavier, more complicated, with ridges appearing like a city outline. She looked from it toward the safe entrance. There, previously invisible from dullness and darkness, sat a keyhole she'd never spotted. 8 corners. The key inserted like it had sat waiting 50 years for this exact moment. Which, she understood, it had. For an extended moment, she remained standing there, key inside the lock, but not rotated. Once she opened this, going back became impossible. No pretending she didn't know what sat inside. No claiming innocence if federal government agents suddenly remembered their forgotten gold. But then she considered her children, considered the existence they deserved, considered the chance this represented. She'd already taken the largest risk purchasing this location. What was one additional risk? She rotated the key. A deep, echoing click occurred, like a huge creature clearing its throat. Then multiple mechanical sounds, metal wheels rotating, locking parts falling, devices that had waited 5 decades to finish their function. The huge handle, frozen across 50 years, suddenly shifted under her touch. Rachel gripped it using both hands and pulled hard. The safe entrance swung wide on connecting metal pieces so perfectly balanced that tons of metal shifted like smooth fabric. Old air rushed outward, dry and tasting like metal and ancient. Her light beam went into the blackness beyond, and what she observed made her knees weak. Gold, metal bars of it, stacked resembling yellow bricks, filling storage racks that extended from bottom surface to top surface. Hundreds of bars, possibly thousands. Each bar stamped with the government symbol of the United States Treasury. But that wasn't everything. In the middle section of the safe sat 3 seating chairs positioned around one small table. And in those chairs, kept preserved by the sealed surroundings, were what remained of 3 human beings. They'd sat there across 50 years, waiting. Rachel stumbled, going backward, hand covering her mouth opening. The bodies had dried out from the air, still wearing their banking clothing. 2 male people and 1 female person, matching the newspaper descriptions of William Hartley, James Chen, and Margaret Morrison. They hadn't died at their houses from natural reasons. They died here, inside the safe, after sealing themselves within. On the table between them rested papers, and on top of the papers, a weapon showing 3 fired bullet spaces. Fighting stomach sickness, Rachel made herself look more closely. The papers contained handwriting. The ink faded but still readable. She read the opening line and felt everything tilt sideways. We're dying by our personal choice, rather than continuing to live with what we've done. It was them admitting their crimes. She dropped to the floor directly outside, the safe and read by flashlight, while 3 dried bodies maintained their forever watch. They had found the gold by accident while conducting inventory checking. Forgotten federal government storage worth millions, even back in 1973. They'd schemed to steal it, had been slowly transporting bars outside the safe and replacing them with lead copies painted gold color. They'd been so cautious, so intelligent, until William Hartley's daughter died inside a vehicle accident. Feeling heartbroken, he'd wanted using his portion to begin a charity using her name. James Chen had argued they required sticking to their scheme. Margaret Morrison had agreed with Chen. The arguing got worse. Chen put poison inside Hartley's coffee drink. Morrison, feeling horrified by murder but already involved, put poison inside Chen's drink for revenge. Then, understanding what they'd each become, she'd made a final cup for herself. But poison worked at slow speed, and Morrison had time for feeling regret. She'd convinced the dying men that they couldn't leave the gold for another person to locate and get corrupted by. So they'd turned on the time-based lock, sealed themselves within along with their guilt and their gold, and waited for death arriving. The crime admission ended with a request. Whoever locates this, please use the gold for good purposes. Construct something. Assist people. Don't let it destroy you the way it destroyed us. Rachel sat in the entrance space between history and current time, between death and life, between poverty and unimaginable wealth. The flashlight beam caught the gold bars, making them shine like captured sunshine. She attempted counting, stopped after 200. At current market values, she was observing over $200 million in federal government gold that got forgotten across 80 years and hidden across 50 additional years. She considered Tom Morrison's caution. At this moment, she grasped why the town had run away. The bank workers' relatives must have known something felt wrong. The federal government investigation must have seemed like Judgment Day approaching. Rather than confronting questions they couldn't answer, they'd run away, leaving the sealed safe as a tomb and a mystery. Her telephone had 0 signal at this location, which was a blessing. She required time for thinking, for planning, for deciding who she would become, confronting this impossible fortune. Emma's laughing echoed from somewhere beyond, followed by Noah's shout of happiness. Her children playing inside their empty town, not knowing their mother had just opened the most dangerous entrance of their existences. Rachel stood slowly. She looked at the 3 figures who'd protected this secret using their deaths. I understand you, she said quietly. Then she pulled the safe entrance closed, not locking it, but leaving it slightly open, resembling a question not completely answered. She had work requiring completion. Not just the physical work of repairing structures and covering roofs, but the harder work of determining how to change guilty gold into a blessed present. The 3 bank workers had died, because they'd attempted stealing it. The town had run because they'd feared it. But Rachel? Rachel had purchased this location completely fairly, inherited its possessions along with its spirits. She'd gotten mocked for paying $750 for a dead town, but she'd actually purchased the opportunity to accomplish what William Hartley had desired in his final moments, to construct something good from something guilty. The following morning, Rachel woke possessing a scheme. Not a perfect scheme, but a beginning point. She used the day normally, repairing, cleaning, teaching her twin children their lessons from books she'd transported. But her brain was thinking, considering, weighing choices. She couldn't just claim the gold. Federal government property didn't transform to private ownership just because somebody forgot about it. But she could report it, could work with authorities to confirm Copper Creek benefited from its return, could negotiate for money paid to finders or a historical preservation financial gift, could change this empty town into something living. When evening arrived, she told Emma and Noah a version of true events. "I located something important inside the bank building," she stated cautiously. "Something that's going to assist us repairing our town. But we require being patient and accomplishing things the correct way." "Is it buried treasure?" Emma questioned, eyes growing large. "In one way," Rachel stated, "but the true treasure is what we're going to construct using it." She used the following week documenting all evidence, photographing the safe's contents, although not the bodies. Those deserved respectful treatment. Copying the crime admission, the federal government letters, the proof of what had occurred. She packaged it all cautiously, constructing an argument not for ownership, but for opportunity. Then she placed the telephone call. The FBI field location in Las Vegas heard her story with professional doubt that changed to sharp interest when she mentioned federal government gold storage. Within 48 hours, a small group of black SUVs was driving the rough roads toward Copper Creek. The leading agent, a woman named Sarah Delbridge, who appeared like she could stare down hills, looked at the safe with the expression of somebody who'd observed everything and still occasionally got surprised. "You touched nothing?" "Nothing," Rachel lied smoothly. She'd removed the crime admission and hidden it inside the general store. The dead deserved their story getting told, but not their names pulled through modern dirt. "I opened the entrance, observed what sat inside, and contacted you." Agent Delbridge examined her with eyes that missed nothing. "Most people would have taken 1 bar or 2 bars. Figured they'd earned it." "I'm not most people," Rachel stated. "I possess 2 children and a town requiring rebuilding. I require partners, not troubles." That created a smile. Small but genuine. "Intelligent. Very intelligent. Removing the gold required 3 days. Armed protection guards. Armored transportation trucks. Enough federal government firepower to make Rachel nervous about having her twin children anywhere close. She kept them occupied inside the school building, changing lessons into games while history got dug up from their property. Agent Delbridge located her on the final day as the final truck was getting loaded. The identification numbers match gold storage reported missing in 1943. The government's been searching for this hidden amount across 80 years. "What occurs at this point?" Rachel questioned. "Paperwork?" "Large amounts of it. But there's positive news. There's a standard payment for finding recovered federal government property. In this situation, given the value and historical importance, she named an amount that made Rachel's knees feel weak. Plus, I'm recommending Copper Creek for historical location status. That arrives with preservation financial gifts, tax advantages, federal government assistance for restoration work." Rachel felt water in her eyes threatening to fall. That's beyond fair." "No," Agent Delbridge stated, looking around at the crumbling structures. The proof of hopes delayed. "Fair would have been somebody caring about this location before it died. You're attempting bringing it back to existence. That deserves assistance." She paused beside her SUV. "The bodies inside the safe. We'll handle them quietly. No reason for destroying families with aged shame." Rachel nodded, feeling grateful beyond words. The agent drove off, leaving her standing inside the dust of the main road, gripping papers that promised a future she'd never dared imagining. Emma and Noah ran from the school building, faces shining with curiosity. "Are they departed? Can we observe the bank building at this point?" "Tomorrow," Rachel promised. "Right at this moment, let's discuss what we desire constructing first. An actual house? A playground? Perhaps repair the aged soda fountain inside the general store." "Everything," Noah shouted loudly. "We'll repair everything." Rachel wrapped her arms around them tightly, breathing in their hope. "Yes, sweetheart, we'll repair everything." Information spread quickly the way information does in country areas, where every person knows every person, and hidden information lasts approximately as long as morning water drops. The woman who'd purchased Copper Creek for $750 had located forgotten federal government gold and accomplished the impossible. She'd returned it. Tom Morrison was the first person visiting after the information spread. He stood in the identical spot where he'd cautioned her to leave, but this time his weathered face held something resembling respect. You could have run with it, disappeared, started over somewhere distant. They'd never have located you. That's not starting over, Rachel stated. That's just running away. I'm exhausted from running away, he nodded slowly. My grandmother was a Morrison. Margaret Morrison, the teller who died at the bank building. He paused. We always questioned why she'd done it. Why she'd thrown away everything. Rachel selected her words cautiously. Sometimes people lose their path. But that doesn't mean their families should carry the weight. Tom examined her for an extended moment. Then he extended his hand forward. When she shook it, his grip felt firm and honest. Welcome to the valley, Miss Winters. Properly, this time. After that moment, the visitors arrived steadily. Some were curiosity seekers who desired seeing the town where hundreds of millions in gold had hidden across decades. But others arrived with different intentions. Historians desiring to document Copper Creek's story. Building designers interested in restoration work. Families whose ancestors had run in 1973, returning to observe what remained. With the first payment of the finding money, Rachel hired workers from the local area. The work began with essential things: proper shelter for her family, flowing water, solar electricity panels. But she demanded preserving the character of each structure. This wouldn't be a fake tourist attraction attempting appearing aged. It would be an authentic restoration of a town worth rescuing. Emma and Noah appointed themselves official tour guides, displaying visitors around with the authority of children who'd claimed every dusty corner as their kingdom. They told wild stories about spirit prospectors and hidden underground passages, mixing fiction with the equally strange truth. One evening, as summer cooled into fall season, Rachel stood where she'd stood that first evening, in front of the general store, at this point properly roofed and painted, observing the sun set over the hills. The twin children were assisting in the community garden they'd planted where the aged park used to sit. Down the road, construction workers were building the framework for the museum that would tell Copper Creek's complete story. The positive and the negative, the golden and the guilty. A vehicle stopped, dust swirling in the twilight. Agent Delbridge stepped out, wearing regular clothing this time, appearing less like federal government authority and more like an exhausted woman at the end of an extended week. Checking up on me? Rachel questioned with a smile. Checking in, Delbridge corrected. I desired seeing what you'd accomplished with the location. They walked down the main road together, passing structures in various stages of coming back to existence. The hotel building would be a visitor's information center. The school building was transforming into a community education location. The bank building, cleared of its spirits, would store historical displays about the gold storage program and the cost of greed. You know, Delbridge stated. In 20 years with the Bureau, I've observed many people locate many things. Most of them, it breaks them one way or another way, but you appear happy. Rachel observed her children racing between the structures, their laughing bouncing off walls that had stood silent across 50 years. I am happy. For the first time in an extended time, I understand exactly where I'm supposed existing. They stood in comfortable silence as lights began switching on. Solar-powered road lamps Rachel had installed along the main road. Not historically accurate, but necessary for the living town Copper Creek was transforming into. What would you have accomplished? Rachel questioned suddenly. If you'd opened that safe and observed all that gold? Delbridge considered the question. Honestly, 10 years earlier I might have taken some amount. Figured I'd earned it like you stated. But at this point, she lifted her shoulders. I'd like thinking I'd have accomplished what you accomplished. Observe the larger picture. Selected constructing overtaking. It wasn't truly a selection, Rachel stated. Those 3 people inside the safe, they'd already displayed me what selecting the gold got you. I desired selecting differently. A truck rumbled passing, loaded with timber for tomorrow's work. The driver waved, and Rachel waved back. She knew him at this point, knew his family, knew their stories. Copper Creek wasn't just her town anymore. It was transforming into every person's town. A location where the history was honored but not trapped. Where mistakes were admitted but not repeated. The final paperwork arrived through, Delbridge stated, removing an envelope from her jacket. Congratulations, Mayor Winters. Rachel laughed. That's still strange hearing. The incorporation vote had been a formality. She was the single permanent resident aged enough for voting. But it made everything official. Copper Creek was an actual town again, with an actual future. After Delbridge left, Rachel walked toward the bank building. The safe entrance stood open at this point, emptied of gold and spirits. She'd had the 3 chairs and table removed. The space had gotten cleaned and blessed by a Shoshone elder who'd known the land before any town stood here. At this point, it stored filing drawers full of the hopes people were bringing, business schemes, restoration proposals, ideas for making Copper Creek more than it had ever been. She considered the crime admission she'd hidden, still tucked away inside the general store. Someday she'd determine what to accomplish with it. Perhaps when the Morrison family was ready. Perhaps when the story could get told as a warning instead of a punishment. For the present moment, it was enough that she knew the truth. Her telephone vibrated. Emma sending text from the house. "Mom, dinner's ready. Noah created dessert." Rachel smiled. Her 8-year-old's idea of dessert was usually interesting, to state it mildly. She locked the bank building from habit more than need at this point and walked toward home. Actual home. Not a truck cab or a general store floor, but a proper house with sleeping rooms and a cooking area, and a front deck where she could sit and observe the town coming alive. The knocking arrived directly after dinner time, 3 weeks before Christmas holiday. Rachel had been reviewing applications for the Spring Artist Program when she heard it. Soft, almost hesitant. She opened the entrance to locate an elderly woman, silver-colored hair and dignified. Wrapped inside a wool coat against the desert winter, Mrs. Winters? "My name is Eleanor Chen. James Chen was my grandfather." Rachel's breathing caught. She'd questioned if this day would arrive, if the families of the three would eventually locate their path back toward Copper Creek. "Please enter inside. It's freezing out there." Eleanor entered slowly, eyes taking in the restored shelter, the children's artwork on the walls, the normalcy of an existence getting lived. "I've been reading about what you've accomplished here, about the gold." "The restoration work," she paused. "About the bodies inside the safe." Rachel poured coffee, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "The FBI handled that quietly. No names got released. But you understand," Eleanor stated. It wasn't a question. "You understand what occurred, what they accomplished." Rachel met her eyes. "I understand they made mistakes. I understand they paid for them. I understand they attempted in the end to prevent those mistakes from spreading." Eleanor's calm face cracked slightly. "My father never knew the true events. He used his complete existence questioning why his father had left us, why he'd selected gold over family. He died thinking Grandpa James was just another greedy man who'd gotten what he deserved." From upstairs arrived the sound of the twin children getting ready for sleeping time, their voices carrying through the aged walls. Normal sounds of a normal evening, so different from the silence that had filled this town across decades. "Your grandfather made a terrible selection," Rachel stated cautiously. "But his final act was stopping others from making the identical mistake. That has to count for something." Eleanor removed a faded photograph. 3 people standing before the bank building, smiling, proud. Back when they were just bank workers in a small town, before gold fever had poisoned their futures. "This got taken the day the Federal Reserve shipment reached here," Eleanor stated. "My grandmother preserved it all these years. Look how happy they were. How normal." She traced one finger over James Chen's face. "He was going to use his portion sending my father to college, first in the family." "I'm sorry," Rachel stated and meant it. Eleanor shook her head. "No, I'm the one who's sorry. Sorry it required me so long arriving here. Sorry I let fear keeping me away." She looked upward, "But mostly I'm grateful. Grateful you didn't let their story ending with their mistakes." Rachel made a decision. She rose and walked toward an antique desk, removed a small key and opened a hidden space. The crime admission rested inside, preserved in special plastic. She handed it toward Eleanor. "This belongs to your family, and to the Hartleys and Morrisons. If you can locate them." Eleanor read slowly, water sliding down her face. When she finished, she folded the papers cautiously. "Thank you for preserving this safe, for understanding that sometimes the complete truth is too heavy for the world carrying." They talked until late. Eleanor sharing stories of her father, of the family that had scattered after Copper Creek died. By the time she left, she'd promised returning in the spring season, bringing her children and grandchildren to observe what their ancestors' final sacrifice had assisted constructing. Rachel stood on the deck, observing Eleanor's vehicle lights disappearing into the blackness. The town around her slept peacefully. The artist couple in the renovated hotel building, the young family who'd opened a cafe inside the aged diner, the retired teacher who'd claimed the school building apartment. Copper Creek lived again, constructed on a foundation of second chances and hard truths. Christmas holiday in Copper Creek was magical in the way that only desert Christmas holidays could be. No frozen precipitation, but the clear air made the stars appear like decorations hanging just beyond reach. Rachel hung lights along the main road, assisted by what seemed like half the county. The town's rebirth had transformed into every person's project, a symbol of what was possible when people selected community over isolation. Emma and Noah had created friends with the other children who visited, some staying for weeks while their parents worked on restoration projects. The empty town that had echoed with their solitary laughing at this point rang with the chaos of childhood games. On Christmas Eve, they held the first annual Copper Creek gathering inside the aged general store. The space that had once stored Rachel's makeshift sleeping area at this point held tables covered with shared meal dishes. Tom Morrison played guitar while his wife sang holiday songs. The retired teacher read "The Night Before Christmas" to a circle of children with large eyes. And in the corner, a small display honored the town's history, including a sign that stated simply, "In memory of those who were lost, and in hope for those who were found." Rachel stood apart for a moment, observing it all occurring. 6 months earlier, she'd been confronting eviction, desperate enough spending her final $750 on a hope every person stated was foolish. At this moment, she was mayor of a town reborn, guardian of its stories, architect of its future. "Mom," Noah called outward. "Come sing with us." She joined the circle, adding her voice toward the group. Beyond, the desert wind whispered through structures that were no longer vacant, passing the bank building that no longer stored secrets, over ground that had traded its spirits for hope. Later, after the gathering had ended and the twin children were sleeping, Rachel walked through her town one additional time. She stopped at the bank building, running her hand along its stone walls. The safe stood open, transformed into a meditation space where people could sit and consider choices and consequences. She considered William Hartley, James Chen, and Margaret Morrison. They'd died believing they'd failed at everything that mattered. They couldn't have imagined that their tragedy would transform into the seed of rebirth, that their gold, returned honestly, would fund the revival of the town they'd killed, that their story, told cautiously, would remind others that it's never too late selecting differently. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and Rachel made a wish. Not for wealth. The finding money had secured her family's future. Not for fame. The media attention was already beyond what she desired. She wished for wisdom. For the strength continuing constructing. For the grace honoring both the living and the dead. Because she'd learned something inside that safe, surrounded by gold and spirits. True wealth wasn't what you could lock away. It was what you could construct when you opened the entrances, confronted the truth, and selected creating rather than taking. The star faded, but its light seemed lingering. Rachel pulled her jacket close and walked toward home through the town she'd purchased for $750, the best investment of her existence. Paid completely with bravery, measured in community, multiplied by hope. Copper Creek slept under stars that had observed it dying and at this point witnessed its rebirth. And inside a house that had been vacant across 50 years, one single mother tucked her children into sleeping beds that weren't borrowed. Inside rooms that weren't temporary, inside a town that was no longer a spirit but gloriously, impossibly alive. Sometimes the largest risks give the richest rewards, but not in the way you expect. Rachel Winters had purchased a dead town and located a fortune in gold. But the true treasure was in the selecting constructing rather than taking, healing rather than hiding, confronting the spirits rather than running from them. And in a world full of people running from their history, she'd selected stopping, turning around, and transforming that history into a future worth possessing. All for $750 in the bravery turning a key. Any person can unlock an entrance, but it requires somebody's special understanding that what matters isn't what you locate behind it. It's what you select accomplishing next. Up next, 2 additional powerful stories that will move your heart. Click at this moment, continuing the journey. And don't forget hitting subscribe if you believe in second chances and the power of selecting hope over fear.